Hello, and thank you for joining me today. We are going to paint some daffodils. So I have a very dear friend of mine and her daughter who had requested that maybe we could do something for cancer awareness. And I don't think there's anybody out there that can say they haven't been touched by cancer in some way. And I think this is really important that we talk about it. And so we're going to do some daffodils today. And I'm going to show an interesting technique that I have given to my junior high kids and my high school kids sometimes too. We're going to take an image. So this was an image that I created, and I'm going to have this image linked for you to use and copy from if you want to. You could draw your own daffodils too. So once you have this image printed off, what you're going to do is you can fill the whole back with dark graphite. So I'm just using a number 2 HB pencil, and you can see that I've already colored this all in. So you would take the time to color that all in, and you can see I'd already traced out one, but I'm going to put more into this design. So I'm going to use a pen, and I just want to add maybe one more flower, or you could add, if you're doing a bigger piece, you could add as many flowers as you wanted to. So I'm just going to put this one down on here. And so you just press really hard on your paper. And of course, that is going to transfer the graphite into the paper below. So this is a really fun trick, especially for kids if they want to be painting something that they deem too hard to draw. See, and then you lift that off, you've got a nice outline. And we can decide which flowers are going to be ahead and which are going to be behind. So we can erase that, and that will push this flower behind. You can kind of go over again if it's a little bit too hard to see. You can go over it again if you want. But I mean, we are going to be watercoloring and using some pen and ink on this too. And then I'm going to add another flower down here at the base. And again, this is just what I'm doing. You may decide that you just want to do one, and that would be really pretty too. Oh, I forgot to put the inside of that one on. I'm just going to draw that one on. And again, I think I'm going to push all of these flowers to the back. So I'm just going to erase. And I'm going to put this stem goes in here. So you can follow that stem down. And then I'm going to put in a couple of nice big leaves down here. And again, you can put them wherever you'd like to put them. You might not even decide to put them in until you start your painting. Okay, so you have a basic drawing of your daffodils. And so the next step is going to be we're going to start to add our layers of coloring. So then I would like to start adding some colors. Now daffodils are yellow, but they've got some golds and oranges in them. So I think, again, because we're doing watercolors, we want to start with the lightest shade first. So I'm going to just start with a really light yellow. And I'm also gonna, I think I want to try this on wet, which means we're gonna get this petal wet first. And we can wet this whole petal just like this. Get nice, lots of water, not lots of water, but enough water to cover it. And then especially down at the bottoms here where it's going to be a darker, then we can go in with our yellow and just touch it in. Just touch that yellow color in. Right? And you can kind of move it out to the tips, but we don't have to have the whole thing, just one color. This petal too, just like that. And I am going to do some of this same yellow in this top piece, even though I think later on we're going to do a little bit more of a orangey gold color in there. So let's do the same thing with each petal. So again, I'm just getting them wet. You can see I've used a little bit of yellow, but that's because I would like you to be able to see what I'm doing. So I'm not using just water, but you can just use water to start the petals because I want to continue to do that. The wet on wet look. So we're just going to drop some yellow in here. And you've got this crease line of your petals that will darken up with pen later, as well as we're going to darken up the colors. Right now we're just putting in the first layer of this yellow. And you really want those paints to just be able to move and play so that we don't have to try too hard on, you know, making sure that it's perfect or that it's going exactly where I want it to go. I might need a little bit more paint so that we can just drop it in and it can do the work for us. It can have fun and just play out. So we'll do each leaf, or petal I should say, first. I'll drop a little bit in here. Remember, as it gets closer to the middle of the flower, that's where it's going to be darker. So you'll want to drop more water or more color down there. Okay, and then I think it would be a good idea. I might put a little bit of yellow in here just for some highlights, but again, I'm going to go in with darker colors on the middle of the flowers. And I'm not going to worry too much about the leaves just yet, but I am going to dry this layer. Okay, so for our next layer, now that this is all dry, I'm going to go with a little bit of a darker yellow. And this time I'm going to just go in with it being wet on dry. And I'm just going to paint out from the middle. And this just gives us some really strong pigment. And just a really vibrant color. But we're not going to color in the whole petal because we want some highlights. And we want to see that light yellow that's underneath too. So we don't need to repaint the whole thing. We're just going to go in. And then you can let it pool again, right? And if there's parts, you know, like a spot that's not moving the way you want it to move, just add some water. And it'll move for you because it's not that dry yet. So I'll add a little bit more of that darker yellow into our other group here. So I'm using just trying to bring it out from the middle and arching it to give the idea of the leaves kind of bending. So that's a nice thing to be aware of when you're going through. How would this petal be falling? So I tend to always kind of work from the inside or the middle part and work out. Now if you've only got one yellow, then you'll just add less and less water to get a darker color. Or you can add just a little bit of orange to get a different shade of yellow. Okay, so now I'm going to go into the middle, and first I'm going to go in with just some water. So the middles are still pretty dry. So if I can just go in and not really touch the petals on the outside, just go in with the pull in. A really light orangey yellow for the middle piece. You can see I've left a line just for some highlights. We're also going to do some pen and ink at the end, so you don't have to be right up to your pencil lines. Whoops, just dropped water. You can dry off your paintbrush and just pick that back up. So I'll do the same thing on this one, where we just add the water to it, and then we're going to drop in this orangey yellow. Because I want that to kind of play. And then the same thing with this one. It's going to be really dark in this one. This is going to be shadowed in here. But right now we want to get this orangey color just around. Doesn't have to go all the way to the edges, but you can. Again, this is your painting. You can make it, doesn't have to look exactly the same as mine. You can change the composition. You don't have to do this composition. Okay, and just darker right in the middle, I think. So before I do the next layer, I'm going to dry this one. Now that that layer's ready to go, I'm going to go back with this really nice bright yellow, and I'm going to do like the last little couple layers on the petals. Just really kind of concentrating on where that crease would be and using that motion to bring out that color. So you don't have to repaint the whole thing. I really like that there's some highlights going on in here. I like that you can still see the other colors that we've placed before this layer. This is just darkening up that shade. So we're still coming out from the middle, using that kind of curved brush stroke so that we can really feel how those petals are laying out in the sun. And we don't want to cover it all up. You want to save some of those colors that are underneath. And you can see I'm not too worried about going outside of the line either. I guess that's some of the freedom with my technique and how I'm going to be adding pen and ink later. It's not really worrisome to me. So I'm going to add a little bit of that yellow into there. A little bit highlighting, but I'm going to go back in here and do some more orange. Orangey golden yellow. You can mix those two together too. If you've got different paints, you can mix some of that orange and yellow together. We just want some really strong colors in the middle here. Some strong pigments without getting rid of all of our highlights. So next I'm going to go into the background without touching any of these petals or for where I want the leaves to go. And we're going to paint wet and drop in some of the blue. I like to have the blue in the background here because we've got that orangey color in the middle. So as a complementary color, that's going to help it to really pop out for us. So wherever you want that blue to go, just add some water and drop that color in. And I like it to be a little bit darker coming out from whatever object it is that we're painting. This is a nice way of just having an abstracty sky. You can see I got a little bit of that petal in there, so it kind of turned it a bit green. Normally we don't want to do that, but that's okay. It is. So you can add more blue or less blue. You can give the idea of having some clouds in the sky. You just want to add some pure pigment into those corners where you're right beside whatever the subject area is that you have. That's usually what I tend to do. You can turn your paper. That makes it easier to, that's one of the reasons I don't usually have my paper taped down. I know there are some artists that will tape it down to help with the stretching of the paper, but I tend to need to turn my paper all the time. So for me, it just works better if I don't have it taped down so that I can go in and do this kind of thing and turn it. So I'm just putting blue in wherever I'm going to want to see the sky, and I'm leaving the leaves of the flower just white right now. Because once we get this sky filled in, we will of course need to dry it so that we can do our leaves. So as it dries, I kind of go back and add a little bit more blue to where I think it's not quite dark enough. And it's still kind of wet, so it still plays out really nice. So once it's dried, it doesn't have that playful quality in anymore. And we want that, so. Okay, so this bottom corner, sometimes in the corners I'll try and get a little bit darker too. Go straight pigment in there. If it's getting too dark, you can dry off your paintbrush and go back in and lift that color out. Or you could take some tissue and lift it back out too. So I just dried off my paintbrush, and you'll see how that lifts up right back out. And then you can move and kind of adjust that color to where you want it to be. So I want it to be a little bit darker when I'm around the flowers here. And then sometimes I kind of like it to be darker in just in the corners too. Okay, perfect. So once you're happy with your background, we're going to dry this. So now I want to bring in some green for the leaves. kind of mix together two greens. And then you can mix in some of this yellow and orange that you've been using. So that's all in the same color palette here. Darken up the green a little bit. I'm just going to go straight in. It's pretty watery and light. And that's so that I can add a darker layer right away and let it play. So this is almost like doing my wet on wet with just water, but this time I've added a little pigment. So it is a wash, and technically it'll be wet on wet technique, but I've added some pigment to that wash. Okay, so now this is nice and wet, so I can go back in and either add a different green to bring in some shadows, or you can just use more pigment for the green that you had before. It is completely up to you how you want to work that. It just gives it a nice dimensionality if we can have, you know, two of the different greens. So you've got some highlights and you've got some shades going on, right? And that just gives us more to look at, makes it look a little bit more three-dimensional. It kind of lost its limey green color there. So it's pretty quick, but I'm going to dry this off as well here. So for the last stage before I start to add pen is I'm going to splatter some orange. Again, because it pops out from the blue that we're using. So I'm going to mix some darker orange. You can add a little bit of this lighter stuff that you've had before. It's completely up to you. We'll use a pencil this time. Okay. And then I'm going to dry that before I add pen. Okay, so my favorite part is the pen, I think. So we're going to go through and add some pen. Again, I'm just using the OptiFlow series from Staples because it just moves really nicely for me across. And we're not going to do perfect lines because I like to do a little bit of scribbling. We don't want anything to have to look too perfect. But again, this is my style. That doesn't necessarily have to be the way you do it, right? If you want to go through each and every line and do it like the drawing had before, that's great. You should do that. I like to layer scribbles where I need it to be a little bit darker. And I just don't like it to be looking perfect, but that again is going to be your own, that's your own decision and your own style. And I think we should celebrate those. So again, where it's darker, I'm adding a little bit more. Of the scribbles, because it would be darker here at the bottom where there's the shade would be. And in here would be a little bit darker too. I really don't like things that have to be perfect or exactly the same. I would like you to have fun with these and not get too stressed out or worried about, well, mine doesn't look exactly like hers or the person sitting next to you. I have that conversation with my students all the time, that they shouldn't be comparing their stuff to anybody else because it's yours. You're the artist of this piece. And so it's however you, darker in there, however you would like to finish it, right? So then I'm actually going to take a little bit of my white gel pen as well. Sorry, I got my arm right in the camera there. Oh, I missed a line. And I'm going to add just a little bit of this highlight scribbles. These ones don't show up very well on the camera for you. But I like to add just some highlights. Again, it's something different to be looking at, right? trying to keep the interest up there. And I would like you to sign it. Now this is a really nice size to do, especially if you're going to give it as a gift, or if you're going to do a card. This would be a good size to do the card. So again, this is the little postcard size that I've been doing for my videos. 10 centimeters by 11 centimeters is the size. And again, if you're having a hard time taking the tape off, you can heat it up with the dryer, and that will help, you know, get some of that so it's not tearing at your paper. Okay, and then we're going to trim this. And I think I might have to do a little bit more erasing on the edges than I usually do. I got it a little bit dark tonight. Oh, that one did not cut well. Might be time for a new blade. Just a shot in the dark on that. So I'll have to trim that up. Okay. And there you go. Daffodils. Thank you again for coming and painting with me, and I hope that you'll be back for another tutorial.